Today's shiur begins at the Mishnah that you find in the upper part of Daf Kuf Gimel, in the narrow lines. The Mishnah continues, Almona she'omra efshi lozuz mibeis baili. An almona that declares that she cannot move from her husband's house. In other words, she wants to remain in the house of her deceased husband. Ein hayorshim yecholim lomar lo, the heirs cannot tell her, L'chi lebeis avich vanu zonin osach, you go to your father's house and we will support you there. Elozonin oisa v'nosin lo moder lefi chavoda. Rather, they have to support her and provide her with a dwelling that is befitting. Omra efshi lozuz mi beis abba. If the almona, the widow, says, I can't leave father's house, yecholim hayorshim lomar lo, the heirs can tell her, im at etzleinu yesh loch mezonos. If you are by us, then you get support, you get food. V'im ein at etzleinu, if you're not by us, ein loch mezonos, then we do not support you. Im hoisa toyenes, if she claims mipnei shehi yalda v'hein yoladim, that she's young and they're young, and the issue of morality might be in question if she remains with them, zonin oisa v'hi beveis avia, then she is to be supported while in her father's house. Tonu Rabbanan. The Gemara opens with a Tanaic source that indicates that deals with the obligation a man has to provide his wife even after his death with a proper dwelling. So the source says, "Mishtameshes b'modor keder shemishtameshes b'chai baila." She uses the dwelling that she had been in while her husband was alive, now that he's dead, as she had been before. Be'avodim u'shvachos, she has the benefit of the services of slaves and bondmaids, kederach shemishtameshes b'chai baila, as she was benefiting while her husband was alive. B'koram uksosos kederach shemishtameshes b'chai baila, and different kinds of bed gear, pillows and mattresses, as when her husband was alive. B'klei chesef u'b'klei zahav, with silverware and goldware, kederach shemishtameshes b'chai baila. Shekach kosav lo. The reason for this obligation is because this is what was written in their initial marriage. In the Kesubos, the following text appears: Ve'ate yasvis bevesi, you will continue dwelling in my house, umitzina minichsi, and supported from my estate, from my properties, kol yemei megar al ar melusech, as long as you are experiencing widowhood. And now the Gemara focuses on a word in the Tanaic, or I should say, in the Kesubos text, bevesi. The word we saw just at the end of the previous line. That word bevesi, Tani Rav Yosef, bevesi velo bebiksi. The obligation to provide the almona continued dwelling in the husband's house is provided it was a house, a regular domicile, and not some kind of squalid hut. That's a biksi. So that if it's a squalid hut, let's say the husband, the deceased husband, who they also have children, you can see he certainly has children, he never intended to send his children out of where they were living in order for her to continue living there. So that if they had been dwelling in a hut, so then she has to leave. Omar of Nachman, Yisoimim shemochru modur almona, heirs that sold the house in which the almona was living, lo asu velo klum, their sale is nothing, has no validity. What's different about this than the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan? The Rabbi Yasi Rabbi Yochanan, Yesoimim shekidmu umochru benechosim mu'atim ma shemochru mochru. If heirs sold properties that were left to them by their benefactor. And we should point out that nechosim mu'atim is a case of a limited amount of wealth was left by the deceased, and the general rule of thumb is that when there's a limited estate left, whichever girls females are there, we such children of the deceased, girls, daughters of the deceased, they are the ones that benefit. They are the ones to receive it. This is, of course, a rabbinic ruling. What happened here in Rabbi Yochanan's teaching is that the male heirs sold off properties from a limited estate, and though they were not supposed to do it, Masha Machru Machru, notice we underline that, their sale stands, it's binding. So compare this with the ruling just 2 lines above that Rav Nachman said, that if the Yisayim tried to sell the mother of the Almana, so it doesn't work. How come there it doesn't work? And in the case of Nechosim Watim, where the girls had first claim, just like the Almana has a claim on the domicile, there the sale does work. The Gemara answers, Hasam lo mishtabdi lo mechayim. In the case of Nechosim Mu'atim, the father is not bound to provide them while he is still alive. The idea that the daughters are zoichos, they acquire. In the case of Nechasim Mu'atim, this is true only after the father dies. However, in the case of the Almana, Mishtabdi lo mechayim, the husband is bound to provide his wife with a dwelling while the husband himself is still alive. So that in that case, we'll say the Almana had a prior claim on the property, as opposed to the case of Nechasim Mu'atim, where we cannot describe the daughters as having had a prior claim to the properties. Omar Abaye, Nikitinon, we have a tradition, an accepted rule, Modur Almana, the dwelling of the Almana, Shenofal, that collapsed, Ein HaYorshim Chayovim Livnosa. The heirs don't have to rebuild it. Tanyo Nami Hochi, Modur Almana, Shenofal, we have a brisa that supports Abaye's tradition that a Modur Almana that fell, that collapsed, Ein HaYorshim Chayovim Livnosa. They don't have to rebuild it. V'lo od. Not only that, Elo afilu hi omeres hanichuni ve'avnenu mishali ein shomin law. Leave me be, she says, and I will rebuild it from my own funds. We don't listen to her. In other words, she cannot maintain her presence there, though she offers to pay out of pocket for its reconstruction. Boy Abaye, shiptsa mai. We'll take a look at the Rashi. There's a little star that we drew into the Rashi. The word shipsot means that she strengthened a house. In other words, her husband died, leaving a shaky dwelling, and she strengthened it. The Rashi presents the 2 possibilities in this one-word question, namely, mi amrinon lo mafkinon lo kol yomim shiochol iskayim. Do we say that, well, if she strengthened the structure, and the structure now will last many more years than it would have otherwise, she is entitled to continue dwelling there. Bearing in mind, it's not a case of it having fallen down. It was standing, it kept standing, she simply strengthened it. Or maybe amrina lo lav kol kaminoch, or the Yisayim, the heirs can say to her, no, this structure wasn't going to last more than another 2 years, so you can't continue living here now for the extended lifespan of this structure as a result of your having strengthened it. So who has the upper hand? The she or the Yisayim? In this case of Shiptza, Teku. It remains unresolved. We continue with another quote from the Mishnah. Omra e efshi, she says, I can't leave my father's house And then we saw in the Mishnah, if she puts a claim like that, the Yorshim can call the shots and say, listen, if you're not by us, then you don't get any mizonos. The Gemara asks, V'leisfu lo ki yasva hasam. Why don't they send her food while she is dwelling by her father? And the Mishnah seems to indicate that no, they don't have to send her, we'll say, a personal portion to where she's dwelling. So, Messiah lay l'Rav Huna. And when we say, by the way, a portion, it's either the actual food, or we could say it's also the value, the cost of an individual portion. So why don't they send her the cost of an individual portion to where her father is? The Gemara says that is they can say we don't want to do that. Messiah Rav Huna, this Mishnah supports Rav Huna. Yom Rav Huna birkas habayis beruba. To translate that literally would not yield much benefit. But if we look in the Tosfos Rid, we have it marked off in the lower part of practically at the bottom of the page. You see, there's a starred notation in the Tosfos Rid. Birkas habayis beruba pirush berov b'nei adam. The more people that are there, mismametes hoitzah. This is a very commonly understood economic concept that when you have, we'll say, bulk, in this case, bulk food preparation, the cost of an individual portion is much less than when you prepare a portion individually. You'll have to, a private or individual will have to spend more for his individual portion than if you have many people that have joined together for a meal. So the Yesomim are reasoning here that if we're going to have to send you an individual portion, it's going to cost much more than if you were with us eating your portions from the same pot that we're all eating from together. So the Gemara now asks, granted, they're not obligated to send her the cost of an individual portion, but why not figure out what her portion would cost as part of their larger household, and that amount to send to her? So the Gemara says, "Hachinami, yes, that they would have to send." Omar Rav Huna, Loshon Chachomim Brocha, Loshon Chachomim Oisher, Loshon Chachomim Marpei. Rav Huna notes that when studying Torah law, the words of the sages, there's a tangential benefit that one receives. He receives blessing, wealth, and therapy, healing. Bracha hadamoran. We just gave an example of bracha, namely birkas habayis beruba. There's greater financial benefit when there are more people that join together to prepare their food. Oisher disnan. The idea of making money, of amassing wealth by learning Torah law, you can get hints into how to also benefit economically. Disnan hamoicher peros lechavero. Mr. A is selling fruits to Mr. B. Moshach v'lo modad. If he drew the fruits without measuring the quantity in the sale, kona, the deal is clinched. Modad v'lo moshach. If the purchaser merely measured the fruits, measured the quantity, but didn't do an act of drawing them unto himself, lo kona, so he doesn't acquire. What happens in a situation where the quantity is so great that it's difficult to draw the fruits unto yourself, and you want to clinch the deal, but you feel that you might lose the deal until you find a way to draw the fruits. So the source says, V'im hoya pikeach, if the purchaser of the fruits is wise, and he doesn't have time, as we just indicated, to draw all of them, socher es mekomo. He can rent the spot on which the fruits are sitting. And there's a method of kinyan called kinyan chotzer, that a person acquires items that are placed in his domain. So that if this purchaser arranges with the seller to rent the spot on which the fruits are sitting, the area becomes in the possession of the purchaser, and that way he's able to clinch the deal and not fear any back out. And of course, we're assuming that he got some kind of really good deal on the fruits, and the prices are going to rise the next day. And hence, you have an example of, by learning the Chachomim, you also have access or methods to achieving Osher. Marpei Desnan. Where do you see health benefits from learning Torah? So we're going to have a source that deals with the laws of Pesach, the laws of Chometz on Pesach, and it says in this source, Lo yilois odom chitin v'yaniach al gabi makosu b'Pesach. A person should not chew raw wheat and then place it on a bruise on the holiday of Pesach. By chewing the raw wheat, so you're imparting dampness to the wheat, and that enables the chamitza, we'll call fermentation of the wheat to set in, and chometz on Pesach is strictly forbidden. And what do you see here, by the way? What tangential benefit do you see? You see that chewed wheat has health benefits for one who suffers from a bruise. As we continue in the Gemara, you'll notice a new marking, a bow tie shape, and we also have a topic heading on the side, the nosei, and we indicate that this goes till Daf Kuf Daled Omen Aleph. Divrei Rebbe B'Shas P'tiraso. Rebbe's, we'll say, words that he close to his departure, close to his death, his last will and testament, if you will. What does he say as he is about to depart? Now, under the Mivneh heading, we feature the Mivneh as the structural note. We feature a bow tie shape. Divrei Rebbe Mofiim Bahemshech B'Kamek Toim. The words of Rebbe, his last will, appears as the Gemara keeps going, continues in different installments, different sections. Gemara Masbir's Dvorov Ben Kol Keta V'Keta. After each, we'll say, quote of Rebbe's, the Gemara will explain each section as it comes along. So, if you find it beneficial, why don't you just take a bird's eye view of the Gemara? You see a bow tie here, and on Omid Beis, you'll notice another bow tie, but you have to skim the page. You'll see close to the end of Omid Beis, another one. And as we say, this discussion continues, the topic matter continues to Daf Kuf Daled. The Gemara. Tonu Rabbanan. B'shas p'tiroso sheRebbe Omar, when Rebbe was about to die, he says, Lebonai anitzorch. This double underline is featured also on the side, where he says something anitzorch. In this case, Lebonai anitzorch. Later he says, Lechachmei Yisrael anitzorch. Rebbe Mazmin Anoshim Shoinim Lofia Lefonav La'avir Lahem Bakoshosav. Rebbe will be inviting different people to convey to them his wishes. So, as Rebbe was about to die, he says, I need my sons. Nichnesu Bonav Etzlo. His sons went to where he was lying, Omar Lahem, and the Rebbe says to his sons, Hizar B'chvod Imchem. He says some things that the Gemara will have to explain, but right now we'll just deal with the translation. He says, be careful regarding the honor of your mother. Ner yehech doluk b'mkomo. A candle should continue burning. Rashi says, Ner yeh doluk b'mkomo eitz al shulchan kamo b'chayai dechol erev Shabbos yabo lebeso mishiniftar. Something that's very hard to explain on a let's say a simplistic, superficial level. But a candle should continue burning where Rebbe used to sit as the candle, as a candle was lit while he was alive, because Rebbe would come home after his death, he would continue coming to the house every Friday evening. Shulchan yehei oroch b'mkomo. The table should also be set. Mita temutzas b'mkomo, and his bed should be made. Here we have two names, Yosef Chofni, Shimon Efrati. Yosef from Haifa and Shimon from Efrat. Haim Shimshuni b'chayai, v'haim Yishamshuni b'mosi. Here we just translate. These two gentlemen served me in my lifetime, and they will serve me in my death. Now we go over these points. Izharu b'chod imchem. The Gemara asks, why is it necessary for Rebbe to exhort his children to honor their mother when that's the Torah's obligation? Doraisahi, that's from the Torah. Dichtiv kabed es avicha v'simecha. The Gemara answers, Eishes av havoi. The woman here was not their mother, it was rather Rebbe's wife. It was a woman to whom he was married that was not their mother. So he's telling his sons, I want you to respect my wife. The Gemara asks, Eishes av nami doraisahi. The obligation of children to bestow honor to the wife of one's father is also a Torah expectation, a Torah obligation. Why does Rebbe have to inspire them or instill in them or exhort them to fulfill this behavior when it's in fact a Torah precept? And that's based on the following Tanaic source, the Sanya, Kabed es avicha v'es imecha. The word es in the Pasuk is es avicha, zu eishes avicha. The word es that precedes the word avicha is a reference to the father's wife. V'es imecha, zu baal imecha. If one's mother married a second husband, she remarried after becoming a widow, and she has children from the first marriage, they're obligated to honor the second husband. Vav Yisera, the Pasuk said v'es imecha. That vav in the word v'es, the rabbis es achicha hagadol. It comes to include an expectation, a requirement of honoring one's eldest brother. That having been said, we see in this source that what Rebbe was commanding his children seems to be extraneous or unnecessary. The Gemara answers, Hani mili mechayim. What the Torah is expecting is when the father is alive and he marries a second wife, so the children from the first marriage have to honor her while their father is still alive. From the Torah standpoint, after the father dies and he leaves a widow, so the children are not obligated in the special honor that is accorded to parents. So Rebbe came along and said, I know that the Torah doesn't expect you to continue that same level of kavod, but I want you to do so. The candle and the set table and the made bed. My time, why is Rebbe insistent on that being the case? Answer, Kol Bei Shimshi Have Osi Lebeisei. Bei Shimshi is a reference to Friday. Erev Shabbos. Every Erev Shabbos, Rebbe would come, and we're speaking about Rebbe after his demise. He would come to the house. What exactly that means, this is beyond the scope of our Gemara markings, Daf Yomi shiur, but it certainly is in the realm of spirituality, where something special happened, and Rebbe would come to his house every Friday. Ahu Beishimshi, there was one Friday, Asoy Shivavasa, the neighbor, Rebbe's neighbor, for Rebbe is now deceased. The neighbor came to the house, Hukaya Baba, she was knocking on the door. Omra Amse, the bondmaid that used to serve Rebbe, said to the neighbor knocking at the door, Shtiku, quiet, the Rebbe Yosef, Rebbe is here. Keva Deshoma, when Rebbe heard that, Shuv lo also, he didn't come anymore. Shalolahotzi laz al tzadikim horishonim. The earlier righteous ones were also righteous individuals, and this special event of the departed coming back to where they lived was not something that was experienced. only in the case of Rebbe. So the impression that could create is that the earlier tzaddikim weren't really as righteous as they were made out to be. And proof to that is that only by Rebbe's case does he have the privilege of coming back to his house as opposed to the other tzaddikim. Well, that's not the case. So, and yet by Rebbe's continued showing up there with public knowledge of that could cast shadows or aspersions on the previous righteous. So he decided, now that it's become public knowledge, I'm not coming anymore. Yosef Chofni Shimon Efrosihem Shimshuni B'chai V'hem Yishamshuni B'mosi. Savur Mina, the reference to these two gentlemen that served him while he was alive, they will serve him after his death. The thinking was, when hearing that, people figured Behadein Alma Hudakomar, that means in this world they will continue serving Rebbe, meaning very simply that they will be the ones to bury him. Rebbe was charging them with his burial. That's what people thought. However, when it became known, or when the fact is that they died before, our Sayu was their bed, their stretcher. In other words, they were in fact buried before Rebbe was buried. They died before he died. Amri Shma Mino, so people concluded that which Rebbe was saying, Lahu Almahu de Komar, that they will continue serving me in Oilam Haba, in the world to come. V'hai Domar Hochi, that which Rebbe needed to announce, that point, that you should know these two fellows that served me while I was alive, they are going to continue serving me in the world to come. Why did Rebbe say that? What forced him to say that? The lo lemru, so that people should not say the following. People should not, we'll say, start murmurings concerning these fellows. What should they not say? Milsa havoy lehu. These guys were really sinners. And until now that they continued living, it was in the merit of Rebbe that they were able to live as long as they did. And now you see they died before Rebbe. These guys were really lowlifes. So Rebbe anticipated that happening. So he says, you should know these guys that served me in this world, they're going to be with me. And obviously where Rebbe is located is a place where only the totally righteous will end up. They will be there with me, indicating their lifetime filled with righteousness. Omar Lohen, Chachmei Yisrael Anitzorach. Another Rebbe request. I need the Torah scholars. Nichnasu etzlo Chachmei Yisrael. The Torah scholars came to him. Amar lahem, and he issued the following order: Al tispeduni ba'yoros. And here we're just going to translate, leaving us in a state of suspense for the upcoming Gemara. I don't want eulogies in the ayoros. Ayoros are middle-sized cities. They're larger than villages, but they're smaller than metropolises. So he says, I don't want eulogies in the ayoros. We continue at the top of Omid Beis. V'hoshivu yeshiva li'achar shloishim yoim. Rashi says, V'hoshivu yeshiva lasuk b'torah. Torah learning, regular Torah learning, shall resume after 30 days. Rashi says on the top line, Lachar shloishim yoim shel ptirasi, miyad v'lo tiu asukin behesped. In other words, that after 30 days lapse, go back to your Torah learning, your regular Torah learning, and no more involvement with eulogizing. Shimon b'ni chacham, Gamliel b'ni nasi. My son Shimon is a chacham, is a wise person. My son Gamliel will be the replacement leader, the successor in terms of leadership. Rebbe is known as Rav Yehuda HaNasi. He was the Nasi, the leader of the Jewish people. The successor in rulership will be Gamliel, and Chanino bar Chama Yeshev Barosh. And the head of the Torah Academy shall be Chanino bar Chama. What you see here is something interesting, tangentially, that is, that Rebbe, one person, combined all of these features. He was a Chacham, he was the Nasi, and he was also the Rosh Yeshiva. And now, upon his death, so he is, we'll say, issuing his instructions of how things shall continue. Al tispeduni bayoros savor mina mishum tircha hudakomar. When they heard Rebbe ordering there shall be no eulogies in the cities, it was thought that he simply didn't want to trouble the townsfolk, the people from the villages, the surrounding villages, to make their way to the cities to participate in the eulogy. So, in order to save them from trouble, he said, "Listen, no eulogies in the ayoros." However, when it became known, when it became obvious that there were going to be eulogies in the metropolises, in the large cities, the ka'asu kule alma, and everyone went there. In other words, everyone was matriach themselves to get there. They troubled themselves to get to the large metropolitan centers. Amru, then they understood, Shma Mino, Rebbe's ruling of don't eulogize me in the medium-sized communities, Mishum Yakra Hu Dekomar. It's for the purpose of kavod. Now, what do we mean kavod here? The man is deceased. He doesn't need any honor anymore. So we're talking about the honor that the people bestow to Torah scholars is an honor to Torah, and ultimately an honor to the Almighty. So Rebbe was interested in, we'll say, taking advantage of the opportunity of the occasion of his demise to have an increased Torah honor experience, where there be mass eulogies. That creates a greater sense of Torah honor than multiple smaller eulogies in the ayoros. Hoshiva yeshiva lachar shloshim yom, another one of the instructions. Delo adifna mi Moshe Rabbeinu. Rebbe says, I am not adifna, means I am not better than Moshe Rabbeinu. Dichtiv, regarding Moshe Rabbeinu and his death, it says, Vayivku b'nei Yisrael es Moshe b'arvos moav shloshim yom. The people of Israel mourned Moshe in Arvos Moav. That was where the Jewish people were located at that time, for a period of 30 days. That's how long they mourned Moshe's demise. Talsun Yomin, for those 30 days, Saftin b'yamama v'layla. There were eulogies day and night. Mikan v'elech. Beyond that, Softu b'yamama v'garsi b'layla, or Softu b'layla v'garsi b'yamama. There was eulogies one part of the day, then it was like in the day, and learning Garsi is learning Torah at night, or the other way around. Eulogies at night and learning by day. Ad desafti tresi yarchishasa, and that would continue for a total of 12 months. Hahu Yuma Dashkafte de Rebbe, the day of Rebbe's demise, Nafka Bas Kol of Yomra, a heavenly voice came forth and announced, Kol Dahave Bashkafte de Rebbe, anyone who was present at the burial of Rebbe, Mezumanhu L'chaye Olam Haba, would experience a portion, would be welcomed into a portion in the world to come. Now, what the Rashi says, Yumadash Kapte Yoim Ptiraso. Anyone who was there. I was explaining before, anyone was there at his burial or at the place of his death. But it seems to be a specific location. Anyone who was there where Rebbe had died. So there was a washman, Hahu Koives This washman used to be a regular by Rebbe. Every day he was by Rebbe. And the Gemara elsewhere tells a very dramatic story about how significant a particular koves was when Rebbe had taken ill and forgotten a lot of his learning because of a particular koves. Maybe it's this koves, what heard Rebbe's learning, all that Rebbe had forgotten was retained by this particular koves. And this guy was by Rebbe every day. And that very day that Rebbe died, he wasn't there. When he heard this, that anyone who was there when Rebbe died would be mizuman l'chaylo haba, he was so distraught that solikli igra v'nofel ara umis. He was overcome. He went up to a roof, jumped down, and died. As far as if anyone will ask, well, isn't suicide forbidden from the Torah? So let us offer our own explanation, and that is, it's a suicide when a person prior to that was in a state of normalcy, but here he was overcome. He was so overly distraught that he lost his marbles, if you will, and he did what he did. So the Gemara tells us, Yotzasa Bas Koil V'Yomra, a heavenly voice came forth and announced, Af Hahu Koves Mezumanhu L'Chaye Olam Haba. That Koves also merits being Mezuman L'Chaye Olam Haba. Now this expression Mezuman L'Chaye Olam Haba, Rashi, the Tosfos has a very interesting point to make. On the top Tosfos, Mezuman L'Chaye Olam Haba, Tema, one can ask a strong question. Valo Kol Yisrael Yeshlam Chelik L'Olam Haba. It's very well known. The Mishnayos and Maseches Ovis tell us that all the Jewish people have a portion in the world to come. So what's so special about being there? Bashkafte, the Rebbe, that it has to be focused that these people that were there at the day of the Rebbe's death have a portion in the world to come. This is a special expression. Wherever you see these words, mezuman l'chayil maba, hainu below din ubelow yisurin. It's without the heavenly judgment and without experiencing suffering. This is a very, very special. It's an offer, we could say, a free seat in the world to come. Otherwise, yes, everyone has a portion of the world awaiting them, but in order to merit that, people have to go through what they go through, and that's not necessarily a welcome or wonderful experience. Whereas in this case, they would get there without all the hardship that is otherwise endured in order to achieve that portion in the world to come. Shimon beni Chacham. My Omar, what is Rebbe saying by announcing that his son Shimon is a Chacham? Hachi Omar. Afal pi Shimon beni Chacham. What Rebbe is saying is that even though my son Shimon is wise, let's say he is the wisest of my sons, Gamliel beni Nasi. My son Gamliel shall be the Nasi. Now we should point out that Gamliel, the son of Rebbe, was Rebbe's firstborn. That's an important piece of information to know as we go on in the Gemara. Omar Levi, Srichola Meimar, Rebbe, that's Levi, reacts to what Rebbe had said with wonderment. He says, does that need to be told that Gamliel will be the Nasi? It's obvious that Gamliel is going to be the Nasi. He was the firstborn. Omar Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe, it's this Shimon, the son of Rebbe, says, Tzricha loch ulemetalosech. He speaks in a somewhat derisive sounding fashion. The word metalosech means lameness. Levi was a person who had been lame. How he became lame is a story unto itself, but Rav Shimon is saying that we need, of course we need what Rebbe says, like we need you and your lameness. The Gemara asks, my kashyolei, what is behind what Reb Shimon bar Rebbe is? He's upset with Levi's question. with Levi's. Reb Shimon Rebbe is reacting to Levi's reaction. So the Gemara is asking, why is Reb Shimon Bar Rebbe reacting to Levi's reaction? In fact, what Levi said is quite legitimate. There's a pasuk that indicates that the firstborn of a particular leader is the one to succeed him in leadership. There is a pasuk that indicates the firstborn is to succeed. Hence, Levi's question is a legitimate question. Why did Rebbe have to say that? And what we don't understand is what's bothering Reb Shimon Bar Rebbe about Levi's question. The pasuk says, this pasuk is in the context of the king Yehoshaphat, and it says, "V'es hamamlocha nosan Yehoram ki hu abechor." The successor of King Yehoshaphat was Yehoram because he was Yehoshaphat's firstborn. So of course Levi has a point. Why is Reb Shimon Rebbe upset about that? So the Gemara answers, you want to know why Reb Shimon Rebbe is upset with Levi's comment? Hahu memale mokum avoisav have. Rabban Gamliel eino memale mokum avoisav have. Yehoram was qualified. Memale mokum was literally, he fills the spot of his father. It means there were no other brothers more significant than he. So being that he was the most significant of the sons, so he gets to be the leader, and that's what the case was over there. But as far as Rabban Gamliel, there was me, so to speak. It was Reb Shimon Bar Rebbe. Shimon was greater in scholarship than Rabban Gamliel, and therefore Rebbe had to declare Rabban Gamliel the leader, because based on what's called the scriptural precedent, we wouldn't have one for that. We have scriptural precedent for firstborns taking over when there isn't any son greater than the firstborn. We can say that if everything else is equal and there is a firstborn, so he takes over as the firstborn. But in the case that there would be mamale mokum, that some other son is superior, that wouldn't be we wouldn't go necessarily with the firstborn. So the Gemara asks for Rebbe my time of an ochi. So then, if Rabban Gamliel is not memale mokum avoisav, if he really isn't the superior of the sons, why was he appointed to be the nasi? The Gemara answers, and bear in mind what we're dealing with is a very fundamental idea. We're looking at what is necessary for leadership. One thing is becoming clear. Being the number one Torah scholar is not necessarily the qualification for being the leader. So why is that? Why was Rabban Gamliel chosen over Rabbi Shimon? Granted that Rabbi Gamliel was not the extension, the continuation of Rebbe in terms of Chochmah. There was a greater brother in that regard, and that was Shimon. However, biyiras chet memale mokum avoisav have. With regard to this other aspect of a person, God-fearing, sin-fearing, in terms of that quality, that attribute of being a God-fearing individual, so there Rabban Gamliel was considered memale mokum avoisav. There wasn't anyone of his brothers that was greater than him in that respect. Chanino bar Chamo yeshev barosh. The topic that we have here involves, and we have it on the side of the minui, Rabbi Chanino bar Chamo Rosh Yeshiva, the appointment of Rabbi Chanino to be the head of the Torah Academy. And we'll see also in this piece of Gemara, Levi Yorad Lebavel. Levi, whose name we saw just a few lines ago, we had underlined his name, he eventually leaves Eretz Yisrael and descends to Babylonia. Chanino bar Chamo yeshev barosh, lo kibel Rabbi Chanino. Rabbi Chanino did not accept that position. In other words, Rebbe died, and the assumption was that Rabbi Chanina would take over being the Rosh Yeshiva, but he didn't. Shoy Rabbi Office Gadol Mimenu Shtei Shana Mechsa. was an outstanding Torah personality, who was 2.5 years the senior of Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama. Yosef Rabbi Office Beresha. So Rabbi Office, he sat as head of the yeshiva. The Yosef Rabbi Chanina Avroi. Rabbi Chanina was not going to be subordinate to Rabbi Office, though he bestowed honor to Rabbi Office in terms of seniority, but he wasn't going to be subordinate to him. So therefore, Rabbi Chanina, sat outside. Avroi means he sat outside of the yeshiva. Also Levi v'Yosef Gabei, and Levi came to join Rabbi Chanina. They would learn together. Noch nafshed Rabbi Office. Rabbi Office eventually died. V'Yosef Rabbi Chanina Beresha, and Rabbi Chanina sat at the helm of the Torah Academy. And now Levi was left without his chavrusa, his Torah partner. He didn't have anyone to be with, to learn with. The Ka'asa LeBavel. As a result of that, he left Eretz Yisrael en route to Bavel. V'hainu di Amri lei l'Rav, and it's with this in mind that Rav, who had previously been in Bavel, and how Rav got to Bavel is a story into itself, which you can learn about at the end of Maseches Yuma. So Rav, upon hearing of Levi's arrival, this is what was told to Rav. Gava Rabba Ikla leNahardo Umitla. There was a great man has come to Nahardo, one of the Torah centers in Babylonia, and he's a lame individual. You see the word mitla? We underlined it, and we have a little arrow to the side indicating the reference to Levi's lameness above. So this great man, who's a lame individual, came to Nahardo Vidorish, and he announces Klila Shari. This is a reference to a halacha that has relevance to Hilchos Shabbos. We're not going to get into it. Rashi gives more background to it, but he simply announced that on Shabbos it's permitted to wear a klila, type of head ornament. Omar, now Rav said, Shma Mino, from what I just heard, I can conclude, Noch Nafshev the Rabbi Office, Yosef, Rabbi Chanina Beresha. Rabbi Office must have died. Rabbi Chanina took over the helm of the yeshiva. Levi inish lemeisiv gabei v'kasa, and Levi had no equal there in Eretz Yisrael, and he's come here to Bavel. The Gemara asks, how could Rav be so certain of that as being the conclusion? V'yema Rabbi Chanina noch nafshei. Maybe Rabbi Chanina died. The Rabbi Office kidi Yosef, and Rabbi Office continued sitting at the helm of the yeshiva. And as we indicated earlier, Levi was not going to be subordinate to Rabbi Office, and he came here to Bavel. Well, you want to know why Rav wouldn't conclude that? So there are two answers. Number one, Iboy is saying, Levi, the Rabbi Office make of Havakayafle. Levi would have subordinated himself to Rabbi Office. It's true that above he remained outside the yeshiva because we had this wonderful study partner, and that's why he remained outside. Namely, Levi had Rabbi Chanina, but now that Rabbi Office, let's say, had it been that Rabbi Chanina was the one that died, Levi would have gone in to the yeshiva where Rabbi Office would have been continuing at the helm. Another answer, how is it that Rav did not conclude that Rabbi Chanina died and Rabbi Office continued at the helm? Since Rabbi had announced, he had said Chanina bar Chama Yeshev Barosh, that Rabbi Chanina would be the Rosh Yeshiva. Lo Sagi de lo Molech, it's impossible that wouldn't come to be. It's not enough that it wouldn't come to be. Regarding the righteous, it says that the tzaddik issues an edict, and the Almighty will fulfill it. This is the greatness of the truly pious, the truly honest Torah sages that are truly and deeply inwardly pious, of course, to the exclusion of a lot of phonies that might exist that create external superficial impressions. We're referring here to the truly righteous ones. They're on such a level that what they declare carries a great deal of weight in heaven. So ad kedei kach, up till the point that even the Almighty, so to speak, binds himself, feels bound to fulfilling their words. And if this great tzaddik, Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, had declared that Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama is going to be the Rosh Hashiva, that has to come to be. These are ideas that fit into a general framework. To say that this always has to happen and we have to always see these things happening, that's not true. One has to understand that these are ideas that have general value. In specific cases, you'll hear of a tzaddik is saying something, giving a bracha to someone, saying this and this will come to be, and it doesn't come to be. Understand that the world is run by the Almighty, and in His infinite wisdom, He, as we say, He knows what He's doing. The Gemara asks, "V'hohavi Rabbi Chia, couldn't Rabbi Yehuda Anossi have appointed Rabbi Chia as the Rosh Yeshiva?" Rabbi Chia was one of the most outstanding personalities that you encounter as you learn through the Shas. As you learn through the Talmud, you see Rabbi Chia as a towering personality. And the question here is that why did Rabbi... by the way, Rabbi Chia is also the author or the editor of a great deal of Tanaic literature that we call the Braisos. It was almost almost we could say on par with Rebbe in a certain way of thinking. Maybe we'll see in the Gemara, maybe even more. We'll have to see that in the Gemara text itself. But why was Rabbi Chia skipped over as an appointment to be the successor of Rebbe at the head of the yeshiva? On the side of the Gemara, we have a nosei mivneh heading, a topic heading, and structural note where we see different geometric forms presented. We have diamonds, we have triangles. What do they mean for us? So we've written on the side, Shuvos Lashela. The diamond represents Shuvos Lashela, Lama Rebbe Lo Minehu, the Rebbe Chia Lios Rosh Yeshiva. Why did Rebbe not appoint Rebbe Chia to be the Rosh Yeshiva? So notice we have a diamond here, and a few lines later, in the widest lines, the second of them, you see another diamond. The triangle, of which you see a number of, they represent Kushos al Hatshuva Rishona. They are questions on the first answer given by the Gemara, the Noch Nafshe. The first answer is very simply, why did Rabbi Chia not receive the appointment? Because Rabbi Chia predeceased Rebbe. Well, what do you mean? Is that really so? And we'll have a number of questions challenging that. The Mekama Mekuros, we see from a number of sources, the Mekama Rukamis Royim Sherebi Meis Lifnei Rabbi Chia V'lo Kamo Shomarnu, that Rebbe in fact died before Rabbi Chia, not like we said here. Al Kushios Elu Yofia Tshuva Shechezeres Sholosh Pa'amim. The answer to this question will repeat itself 3 times in the Gemara. Epuch V'yotzei the Rabbi Chia Meis Rishon, and by switching around the sources that we'll be encountering, we'll discover then that in fact Rabbi Chia died first, justifying the answer that we give in the diamond. And as a result of Rabbi Chia's predeceasing Rebbe, he couldn't have been appointed to be Rebbe's successor. So we go back to the Gemara, and the question again is, V'ho'avi Rebbe Chia, wasn't there Rebbe Chia to appoint as Rosh Yeshiva? The Gemara answers, Noch Nafshe. Rabbi Chia predeceased Rebbe. The Gemara asks, V'ho'amar Rebbe Chia, Ani ro'isi kivro shel Rebbe v'raditi olav demos. I saw the coffin of Rebbe and I shed tears over that. The word here, kivro, Rashi translates that as arono. Arono is, generally speaking, a coffin. Without Rashi, we would have translated kivro as his grave, his tomb. Maybe they're one and the same, the tomb and arono that Rashi uses. Whatever the case is, for our purposes, you see that Rabbi Chia had obviously outlived Rebbe. The Gemara says no, epoch. You have to switch that around, and namely that Rebbe saw the tomb of Rabbi Chia and shed tears. The Gemara asks, "V'amar Rabbi Chia oisa yom shemeis Rebbe batlo kedusha." Rabbi Chia says that the day that Rebbe died, so sanctity ceased to be. Well, that indicates that Rabbi Chia outlived Rebbe. Epoch, no, switch that around, and it would be Rebbe saying that Kedusha, that sanctity, ceased upon the death of Rabbi Chia. Question, V'ha Tanya, we have a long Tanaic source. A good portion of this source you're going to see we have in brackets. What we want to do is focus on the markings, the dashed underlines, etc. The source says, Kishechala Rebbe, when Rebbe took ill, Nichnas Reb Chia etzlo u'motzei shu boiche. Reb Chia visited the ailing Rebbe and saw Rebbe crying. Omar lo, Rebbe Chia says, Rebbe midmeata boiche, why are you crying? I understand it's your death is imminent, but why are you crying? V'tanya meis mitoch haschok simin yofalo, mitoch habechi simin ralo. That dying in a state of laughter is a good sign. Dying in the state of crying is a bad sign. Now, if we skip the brackets for a moment, Omar Lei, so Rebbe answers, Ano atiru mitzvahs kabachina. I am crying over the fact that I'm not going to be able to study Torah and perform mitzvahs anymore. I'm crying over Torah and mitzvahs. Well, what do we see from this? We see that Rebbe Chia is dying before Rebbe Chia. Again, once to repeat that, Rebbe is dying before Rebbe Chia. Rebbe Chia seems he's coming in as a healthy individual, visiting the ailing Rebbe, and Rebbe is on his deathbed. So Rebbe died before Rebbe Chia. If Rebbe died before Rebbe Chia, our question comes back is why didn't Rebbe promote Rebbe Chia or appoint Rebbe Chia to be the successor Rosh Yeshiva? So after the Tanaic source, you see Ibo is saying, you switch this around too, that it was Rebbe Chia that had taken ill, and Rebbe came in to visit him with the whole story as it appeared. That's the first answer, thereby strengthening the diamond number 1. Then there's a diamond number 2, which in fact says that, like we thought all along, that Rebbe predeceased Rebbe Chia. And the question is, why did Rebbe not appoint Rebbe Chia as successor Rosh Yeshiva? So that's what the Iboy Seima number 2 says, Lo Lo table. You don't have to switch these incidents around. Rebbe Chia also put mitzvahs have. Rebbe Chia was preoccupied with mitzvahs. And what that means, we'll wait to see in the Gemara. We did skip a significant section of this Tanaic source, so let's go over that. The source had been dealing with what's a good sign and what's a bad sign for a person in his death. Ponav lamalo simin yofalo. If he dies with his face upwards, that's a good sign. Ponav lamato simin ralo. His face down, not a good sign. Ponav klape om simin yofalo. A person whose face is facing the public, that's a good sign. Klape al koisel simin ralo. Facing the wall, that's a bad sign. Ponav yerukim simin ralo. Ponav tsehuvim ve'adumim simin yofalo. These words yerukim, tsehuvim, adum have to do with complexion. If the facial complexion is yerukin is a word that's a little challenging to translate, so we're just going to leave it as a certain kind of color. So that's not a good sign. If his face is tsehuvim or adumim is a word it's easier to translate. It has to do with redness, a ruddy complexion. Simin yofalo, that's a good sign. Meisper of Shabbos simin yofalo, but motzoi Shabbos simin ralo. Person who dies on a Friday, that's a good sign that he goes immediately into Shabbos, the day of rest. However, a death on Saturday night, on Motzoi Shabbos, that's not a good sign. Meisper of Yom Kippurim simin ralo, death on the day before, on the day before Yom Kippur is a bad sign. But Motzei Yom Kippurim Siman Yafalo, that's a good sign. It's a person who experienced the atonement afforded by Yom Kippur and died. So he died as a sinless individual to a certain degree, having experienced the atonement afforded by Yom Kippur. Meis mechoyle me'ayim simen yafelo. A person who dies as a result of digestive disorders, choyle me'ayim as a sickness of the digestive tract. That's a good sign. But the majority of the righteous die in a state of chole me'ayim. So the question in the source had been that the question that Rebbe Chia had posed to Rebbe was, why are you crying? It's not a good sign. So Rebbe answers, I'm not crying over my imminent death per se. That in fact is what the Siman Ra is. However, what I am crying over is that my inability to continue with a life of Torah and mitzvos. Well, the question then had been, do we not see here that in fact Rebbe Chia outlived Rebbe? The question being, why was Rebbe Chia not appointed Rosh Yeshiva? You have to switch things around here too, as we said before. You don't have to switch anything around. And now notice we have the answer number 2 is also marked. We have a diamond, and along the side of the Gemara we have a long marking. So we have one long point here. The issue then is, if you're not switching things around, that means that Rebbe predeceased Rebbe Chia. He could have appointed Rebbe Chia as Rosh Yeshiva, so why not? Why did he appoint Rebbe Chanina Bar Chama? So the Gemara tells us that Rebbe Chia asuk b'mitzvahs havi, v'Rebbe Sover lo afkerei. Rebbe Chia was involved with mitzvos, and Rebbe says, I don't want to appoint him to be Rosh Yeshiva. That will detract from his ability to do this thing called asuk b'mitzvahs. But what do we mean by asuk b'mitzvahs? We'll have to learn on in the Gemara, because if we were just to translate that, it would sound like we're describing someone that spends his day doing mitzvahs. There are many mitzvahs a person can do during the day. He can visit the sick, he can comfort the mourners, he can give charity. Lots of different mitzvahs a person can do in the course of the day. So does that supersede taking over the helm of a Torah academy, to be the head of Torah scholarship of that time? So we have to analyze this a little further, and the Gemara provides us with the key. So Rebbe did not want to interrupt, to distract Rebbe Chia from his preoccupation with this thing called mitzvos. V'hainu dechihavu minsu Rebbe Chanina of Rebbe Chia. When these two giants would argue with one another, probably argue in Torah matters, Omar lei Rebbe Chanina, the Rebbe Chia, Rebbe Chanina would try to pull rank on Rebbe Chia and say, Bahadi didi minsis, are you trying to argue with me? If we would be in a predicament that Torah would be forgotten from Israel, through my analytical abilities of Torah study, I would restore lost Torah scholarship. By the way, there's a precedent for this idea of using sharp Torah analysis for restoring lost Torah information in Masechet Temura, Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, where the Gemara tells us about many halachas that were forgotten. If I'm not mistaken, in the Yemei Evlo of Yoshua, when upon Yoshua's death, and Osniel ben Kenaz restored it. Just a correction, it was Yemei Evlo of Moshe Rabbeinu, which we had mentioned earlier. When Moshe Rabbeinu had died, a lot of Torah scholarship was forgotten, and through Pilpul, through Torah, this type of Torah analysis, a lot of forgotten information was restored. Anyway, for our purposes, Rabbi Chanina is saying, I have that capacity. So how can you argue with me? Omar le Rabbi Chia, Ano avdi delo mishtak koter Yisrael. I am going to, we'll say, outdo you by one. I will create a situation that Torah will not be forgotten. You're coming to to heal a sick situation. I am coming to prevent the sickness from setting in. And what would I do, says Rabbi Chia? The Aisina Kisna, I would bring some Kisna, is Pishtan, flax. V'Shadaina, and flax seeds, and I would plant the flax seeds. Flax seeds, the flax plant grows, from which linen is made, and it's a raw material for fabric production. And from the flax that grows, Megadalno Nishbi, I would then create nets as traps. That Megadalno has to do with braid work, tying and braiding together fibers in making traps. And what will I do with the traps? V'tzayadno tavyo, and I would hunt, I would trap deer. Umachilno bisro liasmi. After trapping the deer, I'd slaughter the deer, use their meat for feeding orphans. V'arichno megilto mimashchi de tavyo, and from the skins of the deer, I would prepare cloth. I would prepare parchment. V'salikno lemaso delespo makridardiki, and I would then go to a community where there's no elementary education. Makri dardik are children. Makri are people that teach Torah to children. The kasivna chamisha chumshe lechamisha yanuki, and on the parchment that I prepared, I would prepare 5 scrolls, each one containing one of the 5 books of the Torah. Masnino shisa sidri l'shisa yanuki, and I would teach the 6 orders, one order to one of 6 children. L'cholchad v'chad amri lei, and to each child to whom I taught an order of the Mishnayos, I would say asni sidruch lechavroch. Now that you learned a particular seder, you teach that to your friends. Now, we mentioned before the isuk b'mitzvahs. It occurs to me that you can see very well that Rabbi Chia was involved not only in Torah education on an elementary level, guaranteeing, we'll say, the succession of generations, ensuring that the next generation will have its Torah knowledge. But in the course of doing so, he was also involved with quite a bit of mitzvahs. You see, he was providing a meat for the poor. And also there's a mitzvah in writing a sefer Sifrei Torah, in which he was engaged in doing. Assuming that the writing individual scrolls comes under the rubric of the mitzvah ksiva sefer Torah. Whatever the case is, you see, in addition to the strict or the pure Torah study aspect of his behavior, he was also involved with the preparation of it. And there's a lot to be said about this. Of what significance is it for a man of such great stature to be involved with such seemingly mundane activities? In getting ready for the chance to educate the children in basic Torah knowledge. That is something to discuss on another occasion. But what you do see here is the greatness of Rabbi Chia. Now, you still ask, okay, very great, but isn't there greatness to Rabbi Chanina? So just stay tuned. Omar lei Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe says to his father, Rebbe, you're saying, excuse me, I skipped the key sentence here. V'hainu domar Rebbe, it's based on this, that Rebbe said, Kama gedoylu ma'aseh, how great, how awesome is the working of Rabbi Chia. So that you see from here that is in Rebbe's eyes, that was the greatest pursuit with which to be occupied, ensuring the continuity of Torah education for the next generation, not allowing it to be forgotten. And hence, Rebbe didn't want to distract him from that preoccupation to assume the helm of the yeshiva. So, after hearing Rebbe's proclamation of the greatness of Rebbe Chia, so the son of Rebbe asks, Amar le Rebbe Shimon Rebbe afilu mimcha, is he greater than you? Amar le'in, yes. Amar le Rebbe Shmuel Rebbe Yossi. Rebbe Shmuel, the son of Rebbe Yossi, asks Rebbe, afilu me'aba, is he, Rebbe Chia, greater than even Rebbe Yossi? Amalei, chas v'shalom lo tei kazos b'Yisrael. Rebbe says, no, heaven forbid, not such a thing I would never say. Omar lehen livni koton ani tzorech. Again, Rebbe requesting, in this case, his younger son to come in. Nichnas Rabbi Shimon etzlo. Rabbi Shimon, whom we've discussed quite extensively till now, comes in. Mosar lo sidrei chochma, and Rebbe gives over to him some type of a tradition regarding Torah scholarship. It's not very clear what exactly Sidrei Chochma is. To give over on one foot standing all of the Torah, that's probably not the case. But he gave over to him some type of special key to the Masorah right before his death. Amar lahen livni gadol ani tzarech. And Rebbe says, I need my elder son. Nichnas Rav Gamliel etzlo mosar lo sidrei nesius. Rav Gamliel enters, and as we saw before, here Rebbe gives over to him certain rules or principles about leadership. Amar lo b'ni nahog nesiuscha b'ramim zroik mora b'talmidim. Translating that leads us to say, he says to Rav Gamliel, I want you should place your seat amongst the great ones, the gedolim, and cast fear in the hearts of the talmidim, of the Torah scholars. The Gemara asks, Eini v'hoksiv v'yasyirei Hashem yichabed v'yomamar. Regarding this pasuk, it's been said, Zeh Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda. This is the king Yehoshaphat. We actually made reference to him earlier, also in today's shiur. Kishoya roya talmud chacham haya oimed mikiso mechabko menashko. When this king would see a talmud chacham, he would arise from his throne. He would embrace him and kiss him, v'korei lo, and he would call him Rebbe, Mori, Mori. A declaration of subordination to the Torah scholar. You have a king referring to the Torah scholar as my rabbi, my teacher, my instructor. So what did Rebbe mean when he was telling his son, Gamliel, who's going to become the leader, to cast the fear of the law into the hearts of the Torah sages? It seems to be contrary to proper kingly behavior. Lo kasha. No, there's no problem, no contradiction. There's the king's conduct in private, and there's the king's conduct in public. In private, so the king is to embrace and express his love and affection for each Talmud Chacham. However, when it comes to public matters, you have to establish your authority, and single authority is very important for effective running of a nation. And because of that, he said, cast the fear of your monarchy upon them, to let them know who is the boss. Tanya, Rebbe muto b'tzipori umoko muchan lo b'beis sha'arim. Rebbe was ailing. He was lying in his sickbed in the community of Tzipori, and his place of burial is a place called Beis Sha'arim. The Gemara asks, V'ha Tanya, have we not learned tzedek tzedek tirdoif? That's a pasuk, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Haloch acha Rebbe lebeis sha'arim. The pasuk says, pursue justice. So if you're seeking out a proper court, the Gemara says, this Tanaic source says, go to Rebbe in Beis Sha'arim. So it seems that Beis Sha'arim was the place that he lived. And in the source we saw just the end of the previous line, it says that the Beis Sha'arim was the place of his burial. The Gemara answers, Rebbe Beis Sha'arim Havit. Rebbe lived all his life, or whatever, his place of dwelling, his place of living was Beis Sha'arim. Even the Cholash, when he took ill, Amtiuhi L'Tzipori, they brought him to Tzipori. Why that place? Demada Ubosim Avira. It's a place that has a high altitude. The air is good over there. So for people that are ailing, Tzipori was a desirable location. So say temporarily he was brought to Tzipori during his illness, and apparently he died there and was eventually brought for burial to Beis Sha'arim. The Gemara will be continuing with the topic of Rebbe and his demise, B'ris Hashem, in our next shiur, so we'll pick up from this point. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.